This tutorial will introduce you to the Rhino interface. The main part of the interface are the 4 viewports that you see in the middle of the screen. So each of these viewports has a name, and there's 2 types of viewports. There's a perspective viewport, which gives perspective depth to the image, and orthogonal viewports, which are straight on projections. So you can activate a viewport by clicking your left mouse button inside of it. In the perspective viewport, you can navigate by clicking and holding the right mouse button. That will make the view orbit around the central pivot point. If you hold Shift and click and hold the right mouse button, you can pan around the image. And then your scroll wheel will zoom in and out. Also, holding Control and right-clicking the mouse button will zoom in and out as well. In the orthogonal viewports, it's the same thing, except just clicking and holding the right mouse button also causes it to pan, because we can't orbit in the orthogonal viewport. To expand one of these viewports to fill the whole screen, you can just double-click on the name of the viewport, and then double-click again to go back to the 4 viewport display. If you click the right arrow next to the viewport name, you get a lot of different options for the viewport. So I'm just going to make some quick geometry in the perspective viewport. And if you right click this arrow, you get some view options. So you can switch to shaded preview mode, ghosted, or rendered preview mode. If you click the arrow, you can also go down to display options. And this will bring out a list of more detailed options for each of your display modes. And this Rhino options interface contains all the other Rhino options as well. So here you can change the appearance of your Rhino window, as well as options about annotations and units, and everything else that you might want to tweak or change in the Rhino interface. The next part of the Rhino interface are these tabbed panels. And when you first start Rhino, you probably get these 3 panels, although you can select other ones by right-clicking on the tab area and then selecting your panels from here. The most important 2 panels to keep in mind are the Layers panel. This organizes your layer structure in your file, and the Properties panel, which shows you all the properties of the selected object. So without any object selected, it shows the properties of the actual viewport. So here you can see I'm on the perspective viewport, and it's telling me that it's a perspective projection. If I switch to the top viewport, it's telling me it's a parallel projection. Now if I select an object by clicking and dragging a window around it, you can see that if I click from the left, it's a containment window, which selects any objects that's fully contained within that window. Or if I go from the right, it's a crossing window, and it'll select any object that the window crosses. And if I select this box, you can see that the properties panel switches to the properties of that box. So here you can change the layer it's on and other options. And these buttons will change based on which object you have selected. So if you have select some geometry, it'll show you different options for material and textures, but other types of objects will have other types of properties. So typically when I work in Rhino, I want to have my layouts and properties panel visible at the same time. So I usually click and drag that tab out, and then drag and dock it below my layers panel. That way I can see both the layers and the properties all at once. So below the viewports and panels is a status and options bar. So down here it tells you where you are in the model space, which units you're working in, and which layer is currently selected. And here you have a set of toggles which controls things like whether you're snapping to the grid. So if I turn that on, you see I'm just snapping to the grid points. And whether you're drawing in orthogonal mode or snapping to the cardinal directions. Here you see the object snap toggle. So if I turn that on, Rhino will snap to these object snaps. So you can control which ones are used by clicking on the check boxes here. And if you click this toggle, then all of them become deactivated. And here you also have the Smart Track toggle. So Smart Track will allow you to not only snap to pieces of geometry, but if you hold the cursor over, you can see it turns gray, and it'll allow you to drag out a guide to make snapping to different pieces of geometry easier. The remaining pieces of the interface all have to do with how you enter commands into Rhino and tell it to do stuff. So Rhino is a command-based program, which means that every functionality of Rhino has anything to do with modeling or rendering or any other workflow is controlled through text-based commands. And there's at least 4 different ways to enter these commands into Rhino. The easiest way to, when you're starting out, is with the menu bar. So here you can see the menu bar on top, and it's pretty similar to the menu bars you see in any Windows program, but every command that Rhino has is also accessible from this menu. So you can see it starts with File and Edit, and then it gets into different commands for creating geometry, so starting from curved geometry and surface and solid polysurface geometry. So when you're starting Rhino and you may not know what commands are out there, a good way to start is just by exploring these menus. The second option for commands is to use the icons in the toolbars. So there's 2 different kinds of toolbars in Rhino. One is floating toolbars, which you can dock anywhere in your viewport. And the other one are these tab toolbars in this ribbon display on top. So pretty much every command that's found in the menu bar is also replicated in an icon. And sometimes with the icons you can see this arrow which allows you to click on it and expand other commands related to that base command. So this is another way to work with Rhino, and a lot of people develop their own interfaces where they group commands they often use with these buttons. But even though it's a little bit faster than clicking through the menus, there's still a lot of time between going from your geometry window to clicking a button. So this tends to be also a good way to learn about the various commands that are available in Rhino, but in the long term it's not the fastest way to work with the software. Now the core of Rhino and its interface is actually the command prompt up here. So this command prompt stores every command that's entered in Rhino, because everything in Rhino behind the scenes is based on these text commands. So in addition to issuing commands through the menu bar and clicking on the buttons, you can actually type the commands directly into this command prompt. So when you're working in Rhino, no matter what you're doing with the mouse, the cursor is always active in the command prompt. So at any point you can just start typing commands. So for example, to create a line, we'll just start typing line. You can see that Rhino will try to autofill the name of the command. So first it'll list all the commands that start with what you've typed, and then it'll list all the commands that contain that word within it. So once I finish typing the command, I can hit enter, and the cursor will change, and the command prompt will also change and give me further options I can do with that command. So when I'm drawing a line, I can start to click in the viewport to make that line. Or I can select some of these options. For example, I can click vertical, and that will allow me to draw a vertical line in the 3D viewport. To reissue the most recent command, I can hit spacebar again, or I can right click in the viewport. If I'm in the middle of a command, a right mouse click also cancels out of that command. So typing commands directly into the command prompt is a much faster way to work with Rhino, and as you develop more skills in Rhino, most people tend to use it this way, although it can be tough to learn at first because you may not know what the actual commands are called. So the way I recommend learning Rhino is when you're starting out, maybe explore some of the menus or toolbars, and if you click any of the commands, you'll actually see the name of the command here, and that way you can learn what all the commands are called. So in addition to typing the full name of the command directly into the command prompt, Rhino also allows you to associate smaller keywords with the commands, which allows you to enter them much more quickly. And these are called aliases. This is the 4th way to issue commands into Rhino, and because the names can be shortened, this is by far the quickest way to work with Rhino. So once you get the hang of which commands you're using, you can assign 1 or 2 letter aliases to them, which allows you to type in the commands with your left hand while you're continuing to work with the mouse with the right hand. So in order to get started with aliases, you can go to this website where I've uploaded a In order to start working with aliases, you can go to this website where I've uploaded the In order to start working with aliases, you can go to this website where I've uploaded the alias that I use in my Rhino workflow. So if you go to this web address, you see two documents here. The first one is a Word file that has a description of all the aliases, and here you can see this is the actual text you type in. This is the name of the command, and this is what it does. And then this text file is actually storing the individual aliases. So once you have these files downloaded to your computer, you can go back to Rhino. We'll go to the options page, either by clicking display options in one of the viewports or by typing in the options command. And then in Rhino options, go to alias. You'll see I have all my aliases already loaded, but when you start Rhino, you'll probably just have a few that come with Rhino by default. And in this interface, you can make your own new aliases by clicking New, and then you type in what you want the alias to be, for example, AA, and then you can just type directly what the name of the command is. You can also import aliases from a text file, such as the one I'm providing. So to do that, you click Import, and you navigate to where your aliases are stored. And here's the text file I downloaded, and click Open, and it's going to find and import all of those aliases, and you'll be able to see them here. So these command macros should be the same thing that you type in Rhino to issue a command. The reason there's exclamation and underscores here is there's special keywords for Rhino. So the exclamation point will exit out of any currently running command. So here, if we use this macro to make a box and we're currently in another command, it'll exit out of the command and then allow us to create a box. And the underscore forces Rhino to use the English name of the command, because Rhino comes in a lot of different languages and the name of the commands are actually translated to those languages. So if we're using macros to allow us to work between different language versions, we use the underscore to force it to use the English name. Once we've imported those aliases, we can click OK, and now we can use those aliases to speed up our Rhino workflow. For example, if we want to make a box, we don't have to type in box, we can just hit B, and line is L, and polyline is PL, and so forth. So in the aliases, I try to include the 100 or so commands that I use the most in Rhino. So a good way to start learning Rhino, in addition to exploring what's in the menus and the different buttons and toolbar sets that are available, you can also go through these commands, and as long as you know these 100 or so commands, you should be most of the way there to learning most of the functions and commands that will be the most useful to you in Rhino.